Hi there, how are you? I hope you've been well. In today's topic, I want to speak a little bit about emotional intelligence, or EQ as we know it. So first of all, what is emotional intelligence? We hear it, it's bandied around everywhere, often see it in selection criteria in job ads. Many companies are now very focused on hiring for high EQ. They like the high IQ, but they like the high EQ, emotional intelligence, even more. So, definition of emotional intelligence. According to Daniel Goleman, who's a psychologist and a science journalist, he says emotional intelligence is the ability to identify, assess, and control one's own emotions, the emotions of others, and that of groups. So, in other words, you need to be able to regulate emotions in various settings. And if you do that well, then you're considered someone who has a high EQ. It's really important in today's age because, as I said, people hire on that basis. That's one of the biggest criteria that many hiring companies are looking for now. So let me just give you a couple of insights around this stats around EQ and success, right? So a 40-year study at UC Berkeley concluded that PhDs who demonstrated high EQ were 4 times more powerful than IQ in determining a person's success in their respective fields. There was another study conducted by the Hay Group, and it was done over 44 Fortune 500 companies, and found that salespeople with a high EQ brought in twice as much revenue as those with a low or average EQ. Apparently, every additional point on your EQ can earn you an additional $1,300 in your annual salary. So employees with high EQ scores can earn an additional $29,000 on average per year. So this was something published by Barwini and McKinley, right? So there's some stats for you. So people have done research, and the research clearly shows that focusing on developing your EQ is very important to success. And as I mentioned, it is a criteria that seems to show up more and more on job descriptions, job ads. You're often going to get questions in interviews that will be showing the interviewer where you sit on the EQ scale. So often behavioral style questions are the types of questions that they're going to ask to try and determine where you sit on the EQ scales. So, according to the psychologist as well, he says that EQ can be focused on in 4 particular areas. 4 particular areas determine the level of your EQ. So the first one is self-awareness. So this is obviously your ability to recognize your own moods, to be able to read the moods or emotions of others. It's about externalization, which means having a certain level of self-awareness, being able to relate to external stimuli and external forces and people to determine how you would react in certain situations. We often respond better to stimuli in our environment than in our own internal thoughts. And one of the ways Goleman recommends that you become more aware of that externalization is to journal. So when you're going through something, you might be challenged with or plagued with your own internal thoughts. But when you start to journal, you put that down on paper. You usually do it uncensored, and that can give you some insight into your ability to externalize, your ability to assess, to review, to take stock of. especially around your emotions and your reactions. Another way to get that self-awareness amped up is through coaching. So good coaches will help you become aware of your own internal thoughts, your behaviors, your patterns, and those things are important for self-awareness. So self-awareness appears to be the trait we need to focus on the most to be able to amp up our EQ. And it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because most of us can easily see what's happening in another person's world, can't we? Easily see what's happening in another person's world. You can see when someone behaves badly. It's very easy to point a finger, but it's a lot more difficult to apply that assessment to yourself. So self-awareness becomes really important if you're wanting to continue to develop your EQ. Self-management and regulation is another one. So that's about our ability to control or redirect our impulses or our reactions. So sometimes something can happen and you may have a propensity or tendency to react and to react angrily or poorly to a situation. Regulating your emotions or self-managing your emotions is another area that you need to become good at if you're wanting to continue to develop your EQ. So one of the good ways to learn to manage your reactions is through mindfulness, meditation, mindfulness, getting quiet, getting a little bit still and tranquil, learning ways to calm yourself down. That's about self-regulating, regulating your emotions, volatile emotions particularly. Like sometimes we can react automatically to a situation. So me, for example, I have quite an impatient nature. And when things are moving too slow, I can tend to get impatient, which means I can sometimes react with frustration or even anger because things aren't moving as quickly as I would like. So one of the ways that I try to manage that, self-manage or regulate that natural propensity to be impatient is to pause. Pause, stop. Mindfulness does help. I find that if I sit and become mindful or present, take a few deep breaths, that it helps. It absolutely does help. So this is something really important as well. Another important area to master in developing your EQ. Empathy is the third one, right? So empathy is all about being able to step into someone else's world, basically. I mean, it's easy to become critical of people. But what we want to do is understand the emotional makeup of a person or even the drivers or the things that's influencing someone's behavior. It's a really important skill to develop empathy, especially if you're going to be a leader in your field. So whatever industry you're working in, if you're going to be a leader, then empathy is a very important trait to have. You need to be able to encourage, motivate, inspire people. And the way you do that quickly and successfully is by exhibiting empathy towards people. So it's about getting our egos out of the way and understanding that everybody's different and giving people a place to feel safe and a place to shine. Everybody wants to be acknowledged. Everybody wants to know that what they do matters. And an empathetic leader is a leader who is able to give people a platform to shine, acknowledge people for the good that they do, for the work that they do, and able to support them and understand them and create safe working environments if they're perhaps struggling in a certain area. You know, if you're an empathetic leader, you're going to be aware of people. You're going to be aware of their good emotions and their bad emotions, the good times and the bad times. And you're going to use some of those other skills of regulating emotions to help your team, your people through the challenges, on the job, within the workplace, even sometimes within people's private lives. Because, it's easy to say we should separate, our private life from our work life, but we are human beings and we have human emotions. And sometimes it's not so easy to separate the two. Sometimes something from home or from our personal life is impacting in the workplace. And as a leader or as a team member, you need to be aware of what's going on with people and always extend empathy and kindness towards people. And then social skills is the fourth pillar of developing great EQ. Social skills are very important. It's where we bring our empathy, our self-awareness, our self-management, regulation together. It's how we practice emotional intelligence. A good general tip for social skills is to listen to understand rather than to listen to respond. So many people, I know I'm guilty of it myself. I'm having a conversation with someone and sometimes I can be very caught up in wanting to share my story or wanting to offer advice or wanting to respond to, the conversation. But sometimes a person simply requires you to listen to them to understand. They don't need a response. They don't need an answer. They don't need a direction. They don't need to hear about your story when such and such happened. They simply want to be heard. They want to be listened to. They want to be understood. And that's one of the most important social skills that we need to develop and that we need to practice is listening to understand rather than listening to respond. So I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on the 4 elements of EQ, to reflect on it and to ask yourself where you need the most work, where you think you might need the most work, and then plan some steps to turn up the dial on those elements, right? To become better at self-awareness, better at regulating emotions, better at empathy, and then blending it all together and using it to develop excellent social skills, especially the skill of listening. And remember, really important to listen, to understand rather than listen to respond. So I hope that's been useful. I know these are great reminders for me on EQ, and I'm very much aware that as a coach, and even when I was hiring and leading in corporate, my EQ was very important in being an effective leader. In fact, I would say it was more important even than IQ. And I know that now in today's hiring world, it has become the key focus when hiring people or recruiters, hiring managers are looking for good candidates. They are zoning in on EQ. And that's why you'll probably see a lot more behavioral style questions in job interviews. And some recruiters and hiring people even want to see you demonstrate that in the way you position your resumes, context, how you write it, the way you position yourself on LinkedIn and in cover letters. They are always looking for how you show up with regards to EQ. Have a great day. Bye for now.